Hello everyone and welcome to the first game that finished in round 4 of this year's Norway Chess. It is Magnus Carlsen versus Arjun Erigaisi. Magnus not having the greatest event. He did take down world champion Gukesh in round 1 in classical, but then lost to both Hikaru and Wei Yi in Armageddon games. And Arjun Erigaisi, he only lost one game. He lost to Fabiano Caruana in classical, but he has defeated Wei Yi in Armageddon and also took down Gukesh in classical. So they're, still both fighting definitely for first place in the tournament. A win in classical would go a long way, but of course they'll take a win in Armageddon. So let's check it out. Magnus with white opens with pawn to c4. He goes for the English opening. Pawn to c5. Arjun keeps it symmetrical. We have g3, g6, and bishop to g2. So everything just playing out symmetrically. Knight to c3, we have knight to c6, and now there are a couple of moves that are more popular than the move Magnus played. Magnus kind of played the sixth most popular continuation, and that is rook to b1. A move that is often played by, for example, Ding Liren or Lenier Dominguez. Perez, and you want to play b4 as soon as possible. So Magnus really showing how chess should be played. Doesn't matter what the opening is, get that b4 in. We have knight to f6 by Arjun, pawn to a3, preparing pawn to b4, and Arjun says, nope, not today. Plays pawn to a5. d3, and now, again, very, very known position. For example, castle, not rook g8, but castle's kingside. It was played by none other than Alexander Belyavsky in his 1992 game in Reggio Emilia versus Garry Kasparov. However, he lost that game. But yeah, very, very playable position. But here we have here we have pawn to e6, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So Magnus continues. Knight f3. He wants the castle. We have castles. Bishop to e3. Bit of a weird square for the bishop, but you are putting pressure on c5, so it's an unknown position. Arjun will have to burn some time where to protect with b6, with d6, with queen to e7, and the bishop will come in handy once you finally decide to execute that d4 move. Then you can, trade knights, put the bishop on d4, counter the bishop on g7. So yeah, a little bit weird, but it works. And Arjun invests some 12 minutes in this position. He plays queen to e7. All three moves can be played. The engine slightly prefers the b pawn and the d pawn being pushed forward, but queen e7 also works nicely. Knight a4. Magnus sort of hinting that he's coming to b6, but also that he's putting more pressure on that c5 pawn. And Arjun defends d6, probably anticipating knight to b6, but Magnus just castles kingside and rook to b8. Arjun says, all right, if you don't bring the knight to b6, I'm playing pawn to b5. And while you could play it, it doesn't really do all that much. Arjun would just attack it, and once Magnus defends it, he would just attack it again, forcing a trade. Magnus probably takes the bishop, and after rook captures, it's a nice position, probably consolidated with b6, and later on you are looking for counterplay with pawn to d5, or maybe even pawn to b5 later on. So after rook to b8, Magnus strikes in the center, d4, and now the bishop on e3 really does come in handy. C captures, we have knight captures, and the bishop captures, nicely countering the bishop on g7. We have pawn to b5 attacking the knight, and now Magnus has to take away from the center. C captures, rook captures, and he goes back knight to c3, attacks the rook, rook to b8, and now queen to a4. Look at this beautiful move. It's a simple move, simple threats. Is just perfect chess the way Magnus plays. It's how Capablanca played. It's very, very elegant, as there's no good way to defend the pawn. The bishop controls a8, so you can't do that. The other bishop controls a7, so you can't do that. You can play something like queen to c7 to defend the pawn, but then you invite trouble. Let's say rook fc1, and after a couple of moves, let's say e5, bishop to e3, and bishop to f5 going after the rook, it's still incredibly complicated due to knight d5, attacking the queen and the knight. And once the queen moves, as you still want to guard that a5 pawn, white has this beautiful bishop g5 move. And black is just worse however you play it. There's not much you can do here. And especially if you capture on b1, then queen h4 and black resigns. That's pretty much it. You will lose the knight here, and then white will get a winning attack. Also, you will lose the bishop here. Even if you bring the bishop back or do anything, doesn't really matter. You're just going to play captures with check. Now, you cannot move the king, otherwise this is checkmate. And if bishop captures, next is queen h6 and checkmate. So you might as well give up the queen. Interestingly, here in this position, best is to give up the queen right away with knight captures on d5, but it will not help you. So while it is maybe playable, you would have to, you know, play incredibly precise moves. So instead, Arjun says, nope, you can have your pawn, I'm going for activity. And it's definitely the best decision. Magnus will get the two connected pass pawns on the queen side, but Gukesh will get the strong center. So let's see what happens. Bishop captures on b7, we have queen captures, and Magnus gobbles up the pawn. Queen captures on a5, now producing the two connected pass pawns. Pawn to e5 with bishop to e3 and pawn to d5. With tempo as d4 will win material. So bishop to g5. Again, very simple chess. Magnus just wants to capture on f6 and then gobble up the d5 pawn once the defender of the d5 pawn has been removed. So pawn to d4 by Arjun. Bishop captures, and knight to d5. And now bishop to g5. Still keeping an eye on that e7 square as well as the f6 square. Knight to b4 by Magnus, and now not really giving Arjun a moment's rest. He's also threatening to capture on e5, and Arjun finds this very tricky bishop to d2 move. Now he says, all right, your knight cannot move, you can't really bring any more defenders. I'm just going to play bishop captures on b4 and win a pawn, so we might as well have the e5 pawn. And okay, Magnus captures it, we have bishop captures on b4, a captures, we have queen captures on b4, and now how to continue here. Rook f to d1. Of course, going after the d pawn, and Arjun could go passive with rook to d8, but he decides again to go actively rook to e8. He wants to capture on e2, and now you could capture on d4 and allow rook captures on e2, but this isn't a very ambitious chess. So Magnus goes queen to f4. He says, all right, you can have the e2 pawn. I'm going to bring the rook up the board. Rook captures on e2, rook captures on d4, and queen to b7. And how can Magnus continue? Well, he could advance the pawn to b4 right away, and that would be perfectly fine, as it often is, but queen to f6 by Magnus. He wants to have rook to d8 check ready, then you can trade rooks, you can deliver a queen d8 check, king g7, then maybe queen back to d4 check, maybe something connects, you know, maybe good things happen. And yes, it's very dangerous. Arjun should play something like pawn to h5, but he played rook to e6, and now he will be missing that h5 move. Magnus goes rook d8 check, we have captures, king g7, queen to d4 check, and now after king to g8, Magnus just goes pawn to b4. And you have to throw in a pawn to h5, otherwise you're just gonna constantly be worrying about back rank mates, as even with h5, it's not really... it doesn't really help all that much. Even if h5 is played or h4, you know, if rook somehow comes to the back rank and delivers a check, rook h8 or queen h8 will be checkmate. But it does allow you to sort of break through white's defenses. So he does play pawn to h5, pawn to b5. Now Magnus's pass pawn is already incredibly dangerous, and there's only one good way for Arjun to play, and it's not even one that, you know, holds the game. It's one that maybe holds if Magnus, you know, plays sloppy. Rook e4 has to be played. It wasn't played by Arjun, but you have to play it because now after queen d8 check and king h7, let's say pawn to h4, you have this annoying rook e2, and maybe, you know, maybe something can happen. But Arjun decided to go after the b pawn. He played rook to b6, saying, okay, what's the worst that could happen? You know, white doesn't really have a way of advancing. The queen will now be stuck guarding the b5 pawn as well as the rook. So this is definitely the way to a draw. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So have at it. Feel free to pause the video and try to find the most precise way for Magnus, and I mean the only way for Magnus to win the game. The move in question is rook to e1. That's the key idea. and there's no good reply here. The problem is if you capture on b5, of course you can all see the checkmate. Rook e8 checking h7, and now queen or rook to h8 will be checkmate. So after rook e1, queen to b8, controlling the back rank. And now, what was Magnus's idea behind rook to e1? Of course, you guys saw it, when I asked you to pause the video, and that, of course, is rook to e8 with check. If you're wondering about queen d7 to threaten rook to e8, which also looks very nice, the king will just move. And that's, all there is. So you're going to have to repeat once again, queen d4 check, so you nicely connect with the rook again, king g8, and then you will have to go for rook to e8, which is basically what happened in the game. So rook to e8 check, queen captures, and now queen captures, and now, yes, Magnus has the passed b-pawn, and, well, that's basically what he strived to achieve the entire game. He played that quick rook to b1, the sixth most popular continuation, immediately a3, b4, it was only a matter of time, and then Arjun, hesitant to play h5, allowed Magnus to get the pawn all the way up to b5. And now it's objectively winning. Can Magnus win it? Well, let's see. He is sort of the greatest endgame player. Rook to e1 check, queen to e1 check, king to g2, we have queen to e4 check, and king to f1. So does Arjun have a perpetual here? Yes, but only if Magnus stays inside his castle. Magnus, of course, will not do that. Queen d3, king to e1, we have queen to c3, king to e2. We have queen c2 check, king e3, queen to c3, and king to e4. Queen c4 check, we have king to e5, and now king to g7, trying to maybe, do something, but there's just no good way to do it. You are sort of controlling that white king. Maybe if the queen moves f6 is almost checkmate, but not really. The king will have the d6 square, but it's not impossible to make a mistake, but very, very unlikely. So Magnus, after this king to g7 move, just plays pawn to h4. There's no need to rush anything. Let's just stop those pawns. And indeed, f6 doesn't really do anything as the queen is here. Also, you can just move the king. So Arjun tries queen to d3. He played the move with 5 seconds on the clock. And it's a very nice move. He cuts off Magnus's king from advancing to the queen side, and maybe, if you play something really silly, like, let's say, queen f6 check, which, definitely comes to mind, let's say king g8 and now b6, you could blunder the game with queen c3 check, as the pawns are now preventing the king from defending the white queen, and you just win the queen and the game. But, Magnus obviously will not do that. He played queen to c5, still keeps an eye on everything, on this, and prepares to advance the passed b-pawn. And now it's merely a matter of hiding the king over on the queen side. Arjun played queen to f5 check, Magnus played king to d6, and he was in this position on move 48 that Arjun Erigaisi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The king will hide very quickly, even after queen d6 check, king to c7. Not a lot more you can do here. In fact, there are no more useful checks, and whatever you play, the passed pawn is marching forward. The white queen will block, and of course, Arjun knows that it's game over. So yeah, beautifully played by Magnus. After winning against Gukesh in Classical, he did lose 2 games, like I said, to Wei and Hikaru in Armageddon, but now he bounces back by winning another game in Classical against Arjun Erigaisi. He takes first place for the moment before the rest day, but a couple of other games are still being played. Gukesh playing really a nice game against Fabiano Caruana. We'll see what happens in the Gukesh-Hikaru game. So yeah, very much looking forward to covering those, as well as here in Norway, there are no draws. Every game is decided by a result. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nice to play by both of them, but I mean, the B pawn. I'm not saying it. Magnus is saying it. I would like to thank Nidhi Kumar, Marcus Shib, Marius Klimek, Juan, and Robert Arathun for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, most likely with the other games from Norway Chess Round 4. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.